So welcome everyone to our What's Next debrief on the Supreme Court decision on DACA, and we will start momentarily. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Li-Chen, Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs. We have a panel of speakers, including Professor Kate Evans from Duke Law School Immigrant Rights Clinic. Professor Evans is waving. And Lois Yelverton, Director of Duke Visa Services. Alison Rabil, Associate Vice Provost and Director of the Karsh Office for Financial Support. Dr. Kendrick from the Graduate School, and Tiarra from DukeReach, joining us this afternoon. We're gonna spend most of the time talking about the Supreme Court decision and talking about the legal implication and what's the next step. And at the end, we're gonna talk about how we might use this opportunity to evaluate, advance our services for undocumented students, as well as we as institution, what we can do to advance the need of our students. And I apologize at the moment, I actually have a PowerPoint prepared, but I'm not able to share my screen at the moment. But I will also be monitoring the Q&A section in the chat section. So at the end, we are going to have questions at the end. So please type your questions in the chat section, and I will monitor them and answer them as appropriate.
I can share it if you want me to.
Oh, you can share?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me just email that real quick. Okay, would you mind sharing it, Alison? Awesome. Thank you so much.
Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
Okay, do next.
That's more complicated. Hold on.
Okay, thank you, Alison. So this is the agenda for this afternoon. We're gonna have a brief overview of DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival, and Professor Kate Evans is gonna give us the legal analysis of the Supreme Court decision. Then the risk panelists will just talk briefly about the implication for students as for Duke. And as say at the end, we're gonna have a Q&A session, and we're going to direct you to some resources we have within Duke. Next. So before we start the program, I want to introduce our Vice President and Vice Provost of Student Affairs, Mary Pack Mahone. She's gonna give us a few words articulating Duke's commitment to students. Mary Pack?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you to Li-Chen and to our panelists for making time to meet today. You know, as everybody on this call knows, we were prepping for two different outcomes. We weren't sure what day the decision was going to come out. I'm pleased that we are here with this outcome, but to reiterate what Li-Chen said, this is, you know, it's a good opportunity for us to think about sort of how do we increase and sustain and expand the support that's so important to support students with undocumented status, students with DACA, and how we think collectively going forward. So I don't need to take more time than that other than to say, I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're here in the sort of, you know, the outcome that we have from Friday. But I also want to make sure that we don't let our guard down, that we continue to sort of really strategize, communicate, and plan such that we can support our students in as sustained and meaningful way as possible. That's all from me. Thank you to our panelists. I'm here to learn and listen and appreciate each of you taking time for this. Li-Chen, thank you again.
Thank you, Mary Pat. Next. Yeah, so I just want to take about 5 minutes to review quickly about key terms in the US immigration system. Undocumented, in this context, this means not having the appropriate legal documents to establish permanent residency in the US. And you might hear the term both dreamers as well as DACA. And the Supreme Court decision is specifically focused on DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival, which was established in June 2012 by President Obama, and President Trump rescinded in September 2017. 15 states and the District Washington, D.C. filed lawsuit and federal injunction temporarily blocked the rescission on January 2018. And then University of California system sued together with Princeton University and Microsoft. In addition, many of the higher education institutions, including Duke, filed amicus brief in support of the lawsuit. Next. So here's a list of qualifications. I want to make it clear that DACA is not an amnesty to all this undocumented population, particularly our students. You have to meet very specific qualifications in order to apply. You also have to give out a lot of the personal information to the Citizenship and Immigration Services. Next. And here is the application process, which again was stopped by Trump's executive order. And again, you have to get fingerprints, and the application fee cannot be waived. And you also have to visit the application support center for your biometrics data and submit that to the US government. Next. So without further ado, Professor Kate Evans from the Law School's Immigrant Rights Clinic is going to give us some legal analysis of what the Supreme Court decision meant for us last Thursday. Professor Evans?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm going to move so I can see as many of you as possible and cover up my own photograph on the screen there. But first off, I think the most important thing is to say congratulations. I'm honored to be here. Many of you have led this. The win is yours. And I think it is important to recognize how much that advocacy did. I can't even, you did a better job, Li-Chen. Like if I have to follow the litigation on this, and I was kind of starting to look back and was like, oh, I remember that. Oh, there was that other thing. Yeah, oh, and then that happened. And each of those pieces happened because of the outcry after Trump announced his intent to withdraw the program, including the Supreme Court punting on the case for a year. And so we are at a point where, you know, we're right up against a presidential election. The politics of this look very different than they would have if the court had heard this case earlier. And the Trump administration might have taken action differently than I think we will see in the next couple months if the decision had come out earlier, and certainly, you know, a different way. We can talk about, you know, I do want to mention some of the key pieces, I think, of the argument strategy that were really effective and I think very reflective of kind of grassroots work and organizing and communications that is different in this litigation than we often see at the Supreme Court, and I think had a profound impact on both the outcome and the timing, all of which is incredibly important for the sort of overall success and potential future for this program, and, you know, potentially legislative reform, which is ultimately what needs to happen here, as I know you all know. So I am humbled by I think the leadership that DACA recipients, undocumented allies, families, you know, everybody has had in terms of really creating a meaningful mark with the court this year. And I think it's a statement, you know, as we saw on Monday with the LGBT plus decision too, that there are important pieces, you know, of pressure and resistance that have been successful, you know, even with the court as it is. So hopefully we can all, like, yes, I know you're all getting messages that this is not the end all be all security forever that we would all like to have and like to see, but it is a moment to celebrate. It is a moment to breathe a sigh of relief. And so congratulations for that. I apologize. I'm dealing with kids and a dog and a husband who's gone. Anyway, the adventures of remote everything. So the decision itself it's not as satisfying a decision as you might want, and that has to do with the way that the case kind of came up to the court. So the case is DACA lawful, is DACA not lawful? And so there's not, the court did not have the question before it, was the Obama administration following the law when it announced DACA? The court did not decide that question. It also didn't say the Obama administration was not following the law when it announced the DACA program. So we don't have a decision, you know, illegal or legal about the DACA program itself. Instead, what we have is a decision that is about whether or not the court has the ability and the power to review the kind of the memo, the kind of decision that Trump made to end the program. That answer is yes. It's super technical in the Administrative Procedure Act, and I won't spend time on that. If you come to law school, let's definitely talk. That's a powerful thing. But until then, I'll spare you from that. I think it is good news just in kind of the rule of law, the idea that the court will step in and not sort of give all power to the Trump administration, even in areas of immigration, which are typically an area of law where the executive branch has more power because of the nature of immigration law. But here the court is saying, you can't shield your decision from our review, from our scrutiny, from our analysis. So that's step one. The court gives itself, recognizes that this is the kind of decision that it has the power to review. So then moving on, the next question that the court has in front of it is, when the Trump administration announced its decision to revoke, to end the DACA program, did it do it in the right way? Did it consider the right aspects, and did it explain its decision properly, so that you can actually, understand the analysis and all the factors that were considered in that policy decision to end the DACA program? And that's where the court says no. It was a flimsy analysis that didn't take into account sort of all the policy options that it actually had in front of it, and it didn't take into account the really incredible sort of impact DACA has had throughout our country. And I think, as Dr. Chin says, Duke filed, joined a brief to talk about those. The amount of amicus briefs, it may be unique in the court's history. And amicus briefs means like the filings that all of these various law professors, businesses, every sort of entity under the sun filed with the court, by and large, in support of upholding DACA. And so you saw this cross section of, our business will fail, our school will fail, our state will fail, everything will fail, right? If DACA goes away, including a late-breaking brief, I think it was filed in May, that said there's 30,000 healthcare workers who are DACA recipients. Like, you want to treat coronavirus without DACA recipients, good luck to you, because you're about to lose everybody that, you're about to lose a significant portion of the healthcare worker cadre there. So we think that the court had in front of it, an overwhelming record on the contributions of this program, and acknowledge that. So this is Chief Justice Roberts who wrote the opinion. That's significant as well. I mean, he's traditionally somebody who sort of sides with the conservative side of the court. And so this is a 5-4 decision in which he's the swing vote, making the 5 uphold DACA. And he did this really, there's a sort of a quote, I think, from his decision that potentially sums it up for him, where he's quoting from a prior Supreme Court decision from the 1920s, and says that the government should turn square corners in dealing with the people. And it basically meaning, like, this was a disingenuous decision. It wasn't well thought out. It wasn't well considered. And you're not being fair to the people when you're making such a significant policy decision without showing that you've done the work to actually consider your alternatives and understand the costs of it. So that's sort of, I think, the first piece of, that's the overall, like, why we get the decision that we do. Yes, the court can look at it, and B, they did a bad job when they took it away. And that's for 2 basic reasons. One is that the Justice Roberts says the government did not actually consider the idea of granting sort of a reprieve from deportation separate from granting work authorization. So much of the underlying much of the rationale that the Trump administration had given was based on a Texas lawsuit about the sort of the next level of DACA, which would have included parents of US citizens and DACA recipients, that would have expanded DACA. It would have done a bunch of sort of additional but similar programs to cover more people. And so that litigation had gone up to the Supreme Court, and the court at that point only had 8 justices. They split 4-4. Justice Roberts was on the other side and said, you know, we don't, like, what that means when they split is that there's no opinion and the underlying decision stays. And so that decision had stopped this expansion. But Justice Roberts this time around says, well, that litigation was really focused on the work authorization and these other kinds of aspects that go alongside the deferred action. And the Trump administration never really considered whether or not they could give deferred action, meaning we see you, we know you, but we're not going to deport you, separate from here's work authorization. And so Justice Roberts seems to recognize that it was lawful, though he doesn't say it, or it would be lawful to give that kind of deferred action a temporary reprieve from deportation that might be a separate question than whether or not you can go ahead without Congress and give work authorization and other sorts of benefits that go alongside that. So first there was just a failure of imagination basically on the part of the Trump administration. And then second was this reliance interest, recognizing people had built businesses, bought homes, entered degree programs, had 250,000 U.S. citizen children who were gonna have parents facing deportation as the result of ending the program, and that those costs just simply had been ignored. The federal tax dollars, all of it, right? And I think it's at least a nice recognition, not just of kind of the dollars and cents to the economy of a huge portion of our community, but actually sort of like the humanity that is represented by the DACA recipients and the full lives that they live and are affected by the ending of that program. So that's kind of the upshot from the court. Then there's a piece that I think does merit a little bit more discussion as well, which is the last section of the opinion. A lot of let's see, I think 2, if not 3 of the decisions that were going up to the court had claims about racial discrimination in them. So they all made claims about how shoddy the reasoning was by the Trump administration, but then in a number of them, they also said this is basically racial animus. The kinds of comments that the Trump administration has made about murderers, rapists, animals, just over and over and over, the litany of anti-Latinx sentiment just infects this whole decision, is clear from the beginning, motivates the end of DACA, the policy to end DACA. And some of the courts, one of the courts, at least one, maybe 2, no, it was 2 of the courts, had said, yeah, I think like you have shown enough in terms of racial animus to go ahead and move further in the litigation and actually prove that this is a discriminatory policy and had the intention of discrimination from the outset. Now, the 4 justices say no to that. They say, we don't think actually that these comments by Trump himself really infected the decision to end DACA because the Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General at the time, and the head of the Department of Homeland Security, they hadn't really said these same types of things. And so there wasn't sort of a close enough connection between these discussions, between the hateful rhetoric from Trump himself and the actual policymakers who were issuing the decision to end DACA. Justice Sotomayor writes only for herself and says, I don't really think that's true. And she says, she goes through the litany of the discriminatory and just racist comments that Trump has made, and says, taken together, the words of the president helped to create the strong perception that the rescission decision was contaminated by an impermissible discriminatory animus. And so she would have let that part of the litigation go forward. I raise that just because I think it's important when we think about racial justice and what sort of highfalutin legal litigation and lawsuits look like, that we're seeing, I do think that that aspect of the litigation influenced the decision, possibly helped get Robert's vote. Not because he was gonna say, yes, racism, but he didn't have to. He just had to say, yes, you're really crappy at explaining your decisions. And so I think there's sort of an impact, an effect of really taking on those comments head on and claiming, legal discrimination, using that and not excusing it, right? And not sort of brushing it off as like social media craziness, but instead like bringing a real, bringing a very full claim through these cases that I think did help to influence the, potentially the Chief Justice's vote and got a very full airing at the Supreme Court. Yeah, I mean, I also think it's disingenuous for the 4 other justices to sort of say, we don't think these are close enough in time. But I think that everybody, including after the argument, thought that the case was going to go the other way. So what happened in chambers to get that 5th vote, who knows? But it, that vote happened, and I think that at least having the discussion about the context in which the policy, the Trump administration's policy decision was made, is an important one to continue to push at this highest level. Okay, so then kind of next steps. So what the decision should mean, well, let's start off first. The decision definitely means that there is not an end to the renewal process. That the Trump administration has, in the face of the prior court decisions, created the process to continue to receive renewal applications. It has done so. I think the last renewal application I helped with, the person received their renewal within 7 days. These can go very, very fast. So that continues, as it always has. The next thing is that what the decision says is that Trump's attempt to end the program in 2017 was wrong, was impermissible, and is void. And so what the next step from that should be is that we go back to a pre-September 2017 world in which new applications have to be received and applications for advanced parole so that individuals can leave the country and come back should be received as well. The Trump administration has not taken steps yet to receive new applications or advanced parole applications, but that is what national advocacy groups are calling for now, because they can't point to anything to say why they would be denying that. I think that there's the potential that the next step in that will need to be one of the lower courts who had already said that the attempt to end the DACA program was unlawful, that as the case goes back from the Supreme Court to those lower courts, that the lower court will say, okay, now as a result of this decision, you have to receive new applications and advanced parole applications as well. So it could take some time, although the Trump administration could certainly recognize the writing on the wall now and open those up. They're not yet facing sort of a forced order to do that, but it's very hard to see. The Supreme Court, vacated the policy to deny or to stop accepting those applications. So I think we should be seeing a change to accept those applications from new DACA, new DACA eligible individuals very soon. Advanced parole is really important as well. So not only does it let individuals like go visit family, study abroad, participate in international conferences, continue, their work, their research, their professional careers. It also opens up avenues to adjust to lawful permanent residence upon return, because you actually get admitted into the country properly. And so it can change legally your options in the future as well. So I think it's going to be very important to kind of keep track of when those additional programs open up again, because they could be really, really beneficial. There are, I think, 2 years now of people who have entered college that were not able to apply for DACA. And so now those individuals should be able to, well, soon anyway, those individuals should be able to apply and get the work authorization. So then there's kind of the final question of like, well, will Trump, I mean, he tweeted on Friday that he's going to try to end it again and that they're preparing paperwork. And there is no doubt, and it's clear from the opinion itself, he has the legal authority to end the program. He just didn't do it the right way the last time around. And one of the courts gave him another opportunity to do it the right way. And he didn't do it, like he punted. He said, nah, we think the last time was good enough. And so this question of will he actually make good on the tweet is, I think, so wrapped into a political calculus about the elections and how he wants to look hard on immigration, but not experience the blowback from ending this policy. That's a little like, I don't run political campaigns for a reason, so it's a hard for me to predict. Personally, I think that, and a lot of like commentators are saying it's unlikely that he's really gonna just end the program full out before the election because of the fallout that that he would face as a result of that. I can imagine him trying to do something that threatens Congress if they don't act, to try to put pressure there and sort of move, have his cake and eat it too, in terms of saying he's going to end DACA, but not facing the opposition if in fact he did. So I think I'm optimistic that we're going to see, a continuation of the program, and likely, it's hard for me to imagine how it doesn't happen, and a reopening altogether of all the benefits of DACA. So that is, that all seems really good. United We Dream, and probably Define America as well, has ways to sort of enroll in text updates so that, when the administration is figuring out exactly how to deal with the implications of the decision, that news goes out really quickly. There are a lot of attorneys ready for those new DACA applications and those advanced parole applications. The minute that the administration sort of opens its doors to those, they'll get a little bit of leeway, I think, to organize, sort of a process for receiving those applications and deciding them. But I do think we'll see court orders that require that, unless the Trump administration really does take a second chance and tries to end DACA, and that seems highly unlikely given the upcoming election. So I think by and all good news, not as good as Congress fixing the law so that we don't have to worry about this, and you most especially. But at the same time, I think a real victory for mobilization and allyship, and sort of a recognition of the deep value that immigration brings to our country, and kind of a recognition of what our community really does look like, and the need to make sure that it remains as intact in a good way, and supportive of many folks. And I think that the DACA mobilizers and movement leaders have done a brilliant job in kind of demanding justice beyond DACA, and so are very clear in expressing that they're not going to get traded for a wall, and they're and really setting policy demands that are far greater than a solution for DACA holders alone. And I think, you know, that policy position is very helpful given the overwhelming support in both political parties for DACA. So you have, you know, around 70% of all voters supporting DACA, and that includes majorities in both political parties. That's it for me.
So I'd like to welcome you to submit questions to our chat session. And Professor Evan, can you just clarify? So are the current DACA recipient, are they eligible to submit advance parole application, or those who weren't able to submit application for DACA can submit application now, or should they wait till administrative
I think we have to
policy
wait.
comes?
I think we have to wait until USCIS has on their website that they're accepting those new applications. They should decide to do that, right? They really have no basis to deny accepting those at this point. But I think if you mailed something right now, it would get sent back to you. And so I think that we're going to see some shuffling, a bunch of advocacy, possibly some congressional members, maybe a court or two saying like, guys, you lost, you have to open up again. They within a few days of the injunction back in 2018, they reopened their process and sort of explained what the requirements were. And so I think that, you know, in this moment in time, they're going to be given the benefit of the doubt, or, you know, kind of given a grace period to organize themselves to accept those new applications again and the advanced parole applications. I can imagine, however, that it's going to require a fight to really force them to actually open up again. But I do think that fight will happen. I don't think they have a basis to deny that, given the way that the Supreme Court decision ended. The Supreme Court decision affirmed the case coming out of Washington, D.C. And that case required the administration to accept new applications and advanced parole applications. But because that court knew the Supreme Court was going to look at this, it put like a temporary hold on that part of its judgment. And so by the Supreme Court affirming that particular court case, I think as things shuffle out in the next few days, the implication is going to be, well, that court ordered you to accept new applications and to accept advanced parole applications, and it's that court that the Supreme Court agreed with. So, but don't spend $500 now and put it in the mail. Pay attention to like the day-by-day updates, because I think that will come, but I don't think it's there today.
So if once we are closely monitor the USCIS information, once the information is available, we will send it to throughout the university community. And my next question to you, Professor Evan, is slightly different, because there are news report that came out today that USCIS, which is pretty much fee-driven funding, there possibility that their system is slowing down. They might run out of funds and furlough employee. Obviously, this is not just affecting DACA, but a lot of international student applications and H-1B applications. And sort of what is your opinion out there in terms of USCIS furlough its employee and shut down the whole system?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of a few things in there. I think it seems very difficult to me to like just shut down USCIS based on lack of funds. I mean, there has been litigation. Well, there has been challenges to the fact that USCIS's funding is getting taken by ICE for enforcement. And I think challenges to whether or not that's actually legal, given the way USCIS was kind of set up to operate and to use its funds for its own operations. But I do think the sort of perceived slowdown could be real because of reductions in the size of the officers that are actually reviewing these. And I saw in the chat sort of this question of like, well, if they accept them, do they have to adjudicate them? I think the answer is yes, but you know, do they have a time frame within which they have to answer, you know, yes or no on any application? Almost never. Naturalization has a firm timeline for the decision and you can sue after that. It's really hard to force a decision in other kinds of applications. I think if, you know, people do, you know, periodically and sometimes suing over them will then make them just decide it because it's easier than going through a lawsuit. And I think if that were happening system-wide, you would see, you know, litigation over that again. But I don't think they could shut down USCIS. I mean, I don't think USCIS could shut itself down. But I do think that you could see sort of a slow processing speed. And that's already been true under Trump. Like the processing speeds have gotten way, way slower for I think every application. And I don't think that's, I mean, I think that's, you know, both a result of systemic underfunding as well as potentially sort of a notion of like, well, let's make sure that we review and look at like nobody rush to approve anything.
Thank you, Professor Evan. So we have other university leaders that are here with us. So,
can I just, there was a question on
sure.
that. If the administration decided to try and close the program down again, could new applications be simultaneously processed for some window of time? I think that's the kind of domino game that everybody's trying to play right now, is getting things ready so that when, I think there's the belief of like, when the decision comes to say you have to accept new applications and applications for advanced parole, those can get in fast enough before the Trump administration takes any kind of action to actually shut the program down again. These are the kind of like, you know, guessing games that make like, you know, that just make living in this immigration policy land miserable, right? And so I think that there is the possibility that there might be like a small window for new applications and advanced parole applications, and that the Trump administration would announce sort of some other intent to end the program. But you know, that assumes that he's kind of willing to take that makes sense for him politically in the face of the presidential election. And so this is why I think like all of us are going to be kind of constantly looking at what's going on at USCIS. Can you get some of this stuff in? Because the USCIS folks, you know, they're not the ones making these high-level political decisions. So, you know, they have to kind of do what the courts tell them, you know, until something changes from above.
Okay, so we're gonna save time at the end for some Q&A as well, but I'd like to open the next 5-10 minutes to other university leader, Lois Yelverton from Duke Visa Services, Tiarra Wei from DukeReach, Dr. Alan Kendrick from the Graduate School, and Dr. Rabil from the Karsh Office of Financial Support. Whether you have any comments that you wish to make at this time?
Li-Chen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm deferring to my colleagues because I did want to make a comment. I wanted to share an email from the Dean of the Graduate School, Dr. Paul D. McLean, to again, I think it's important that the folks on the call understand the tenor from the graduate school. And by that, I mean, you know, our thoughts and our support of DACA for the subset of students that we control, the students in the Doctor of Philosophy programs and the research master's degrees, Master of Arts and Master of Science. I do know that one of the students is on the call, and if you give me permission, Melissa, I just wanted to share some thoughts from the Dean of the Graduate School.
Sure.
Ron?
Yeah.
I just want to share briefly just the email that was sent, and I'm very grateful to our students in the graduate school, but to folks like Melissa Minto and her colleagues who have been pushing as well for the graduate school to say, you know, what is happening. So Melissa, if you give me permission, I'd just like to briefly share the words from Paul McLean.
You can definitely share the email.
Thank you, Melissa. So Dr. McLean says, quote, "I just saw the incredible news about the Supreme Court ruling. We are all celebrating and breathing a sigh of relief. I want to let you know that we are continuing to work with the university on potential options for supporting DACA graduate students in the event DACA is rescinded. We will need to study today's ruling and what it means for the plans we have been exploring. I will update you when we know more. In the meantime, we will continue to work with the university to advocate for our DACA community. Sincerely, Paula D. McLean." So just briefly, I want to make sure that our colleagues and students understand where we are in the graduate school. I'm thankful for the update from Professor Evans, and Professor Evans has a bit more optimism. I'm really nervous because I do believe or get the sense that the current administration has the ability to revisit DACA and make while not a similar argument, a similar decision. I am concerned as a political scientist who studies, quote, rationality, what it means when people and individuals are not rational and make what we call suboptimal choices. Having said that, I just want to make sure that we are supporting our DACA students and are, as Professor McLean said, breathing a sigh of relief for the time being, until such time we have to revisit this issue. Thank you.
Yeah, and I do want to be clear. I mean, President Trump could issue something today that meets the standard that the Supreme Court set out to end DACA. It is well within his power, and it's not that hard to go through the checklist and do the things that the Supreme Court said. It is about a political calculus. It is not about sort of a legal authority, you know, and that is clear, you know, from the very beginning of that decision and throughout.
Any other colleagues that would like to share? Lois Yelverton would like to share. She's having some issue with her speaker, but she would like to add that information about DACA will be shared on the Duke Visa Services website momentarily as well. So you can also check out information on the Duke Visa Services at visaservices.duke.edu. Okay, Alison, could you please share the next slide? I just want to share quickly some of the centralized resources that's available to everybody. So Student Affairs has a centralized undocumented student support website. You can get all kinds of academic as well as co-curricular information We do have a 24-hour Dean on Call system, and it's available to all. If you ever come across any challenges or issues that you would like Duke to support, please call that number. And Student Affairs also support, I want to highlight our incredible student organization, Define American Duke Chapter, the Duke Student Government, as well as Mi Gente, a lot of the cultural groups. Again, I want to echo what Professor Evans said earlier, student support and then the voice of student allies are important in this fight for really social equity and justice as well. I also want to highlight that we do have undocumented ally training, which will be offered online next year as well. And that's again, you know, to the university community, faculty and staff in terms of issues that will continue. This Supreme Court ruling by no ways it's a permanent solution, while do continue to open its door for our undocumented students, and how can we as faculty and staff continue to support our students and scholars. So I'm gonna go over some of the questions in the chat session. So Professor Evan, you answered this. So what will happen if someone who's overseas and they are on advance parole and then the administration decide to withdraw the advance parole approval?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what happened when the Trump administration rescinded DACA in September of 2017. I think that individuals who had already undertaken the travel based on the advance parole were able to complete that and come back to the United States without an issue. The Trump administration did not process pending advance parole applications at that time. So if you were kind of in the list and had not gotten an advance parole document yet, they didn't keep processing them. That, unlike the DACA applications, where if you had an application in, they did finish processing everything that was in the pile. And so I don't remember if you hadn't actually left on your travel, if you were allowed to leave and still come back, but you weren't stranded if you were currently on your travel is my recollection. So sorry, I can look a little bit more at that, but that would be surprising that, you know, I think that those individuals who had advance parole were in the course of the travel that had been approved were able to complete that in return.
So the next question is, given this decision, would there be opportunity to reach out to sophomore or incoming first year in terms of how Duke will assist them with getting the new application, such as the applying for DACA and advance parole? So I know the Immigrant Rights Clinic has helped review the DACA applications when it was being accepted. I assume.
Yeah, and we potentially be able to, that's all about kind of capacity for us. And if we have enough students to help review those and make sure that everything is good to go. It's the renewal process, as many of you know, is quite smooth and pretty minimal. New applications, though, are much more intensive in terms of the documentation required for all those requirements you listed, Dr. Chin, you know, to demonstrate that you meet those requirements. So I think it's possible that we'd be able to help with some of that, you know, and maybe do some of that. There are Apex Immigration Services, I think that's the name of the firm in Apex, North Carolina, is really has done a lot of DACA work. And so they get a lot of local referrals. And for a while they were maintaining a fund that was available to assist with the filing fees as well. So that's a good option as well. And we could, you know, we could refer out to other places if we're not able to take the cases.
And I also want to add that if an undergraduate student who is on financial aid needing to apply for DACA or advanced parole, it's possible that the undergraduate financial aid office will be able to offer assistance. So be sure to, if you are a student, speak to your financial aid counselor.
Yeah, and also that includes the travel, if there's any travel that's needed to get to offices or to get documentation. So we generally just require or request a listing of expenses that we can then help you cover.
Thank you, Dr. Rabil.
Li-Chen?
Yes.
I would love to coordinate on a communication to go out to incoming first years and sophomores with this. I think just because I imagine that first years coming in would not know what we've got, and that sophomores, you know, having been through the transitions that they've been through. So just thanks to Axel for the question, because I think there's got to be a way that we can reach out to people proactively and help them understand what's possible. Thanks, Axel.
Yeah, and on my
So I've reached out to all the first year incomes just about the financial piece of it, to sort of say, we're here, you know, if you need to renew or you're not sure, you know, give us a call or give me a call, and that there's financial support as an incoming student, that if you needed to apply over the summer, even, we could probably figure out what we needed to do, you know, even if you hadn't gotten to campus yet. So the first years, I think at least I covered and sent out Li-Chen's information and a few other things. So in terms of sophomores, I'm not exactly sure what we want to send out, but I'm happy to help disseminate the information for the undergraduates, since I tend to be one of the few people who can just disseminate the information pretty easily. So I'm happy to play that role, even though, you know, whatever's in my job description, I'm not exactly sure anymore, but you know, that's perfectly fine. And so if there are messages that everybody wants like to get out, I'm super happy to get them out and make sure that everybody's gotten them.
Yeah, and I think, I'm sure many of us will be paying very close attention to the question of the new applications and the advanced parole. And so, you know, we could be in touch about like, okay, once there is hopefully you know, that recognition that the government has to start accepting those again, you know, unless they do take some other new action to try to end the program, to get folks informed about that change, since that would be such a significant change to people. Even when I saw, you know, in the immigration sort of listservs and the chat rooms and everything as the decision was coming out, it took a while. Like I was like, there were a number of us that were like, I think this means new applications. Like, I don't see how it couldn't mean that. And so it is taking a little bit to kind of get everybody recognizing that and sort of making sure that actually happens.
Yeah, and then something from Lois Yelverton, the director of Duke Visa Services, is one student who received employment authorization, be sure to update those employment information with her office as well. Again, that Duke Visa Services.duke.edu. You can also see their phone numbers on there as well. I want to thank all the panelists as well as participants for taking the time to participate in this very important topic. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. It's very much part of our advocacy for social justice and equity that Duke welcome all students to our community. And please continue to advocate for justice for all. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you.